Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time it is in the world where you are. Thank you for joining us today on Mavericks in Faith and Culture. And before we get started, Kevin, open us in a word of prayer, please.
Yes, let's go to the Father. Father, we thank you and we praise you. We give you all the glory and honor for this day and this time and this season. It's such an exciting time, and we thank you for your grace and your mercy that you continue to give us day to day and moment to moment. We ask that you would superintend over this meeting tonight. You would bless everything that we contemplate, all of the discourse and dialogue, that you would be glorified in what's discussed. So, Father, let your will be done. We just thank you and we praise you for everyone that will tune in. We ask that you would bless their lives, that they would indeed be edified, and that you would be glorified in all things that are said. We give you all praise, honor, and glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Let's get into education. So, I mean, I don't ever think any of us ever thought that Department of Education and Linda McMahon would be in the same sentence, but here we are.
It's all about wrestling. Somewhere, somebody's wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So here we are, and her job is to put herself out of a job, and that's an interesting place to be. And I think that's one that really puts her and her department in a place of accountability, right? So they're not there to grow and be bigger and build more programs, but they're actually there to streamline themselves until they have dispersed all the responsibilities and put the money back into the states. I'm hearing feedback. Do you guys hear that?
No.
And
No.
okay, it must just be me. Sorry about that. So, if this is the case, let's have some of the first discussions before we delve deeper. How is it that she's going to be able to put herself out of a job? I think a lot of people are still panicking at the thought that the Department of Education is going to dissolve, at least at the federal level. So, Kevin, come right in first and explain to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think Neil can give us all of the backgrounds and the dates and the years that the Department of Education came around and all the history, on this. But I want to start with the fact that it's really, really interesting that you have a secretary in charge of the Department of Education. This is not her like sweet spot in life. I mean, she's a business person, business executive, known mostly for wrestling and that whole enterprise that she grew there. But what President Trump knows her for is that she is a disruptor. She knows how to really disrupt existing paradigms and actually make them better, not completely destroy them to where they don't work and not function anymore, but to make them better. So he saw, I think even before she saw, um, look, I need you, Linda McMahon, to come in here and completely tear apart the Department of Education, not to where it it can't be a resource for our children and our teachers and all the people involved in education, but destroy it to the extent that it's no more bureaucratic, that it is not a Washington thing, that it is not sort of autocratic in the sense that all of the education standards and policies are made here in Washington and then distributed, the marching orders distributed to the various schools. He says, no, destroy it to the extent that the states and the cities and all those communities can take full responsibility for the curriculum and the standards of which they want to teach their children. It's much better if the funds are spent closer to home because that means that parents, novel thought, can actually control better the education that their children receive. And if their children are not receiving the right education in the public school, then maybe they can go charter, maybe they can go parochial, maybe they can go homeschool networks, whatever. The goal is to make sure that we don't have a bureaucratic mass anymore in Washington, D.C., but that is completely decentralized and the funds are sent to the various states and cities and towns and communities that are trying to properly educate their children. So this is really, in my opinion, a master stroke because I don't think any president has ever spoken about this before. I mean, they give you some platitudes. Well, we can look at the Department of Education and maybe make some changes, but the thought of completely um, disrupting it to the extent that there is no edifice, if you will, in DC, and it's all distributed to the states. That's a whole new paradigm. And I think Linda McMahon is the kind of person, and based on her background, that President Trump has known her, business and all that. So he would know what he thinks her core competencies are. Apparently, she's the one that can actually come in and make these dramatic changes and actually restore education standards back to our children while giving parents better control over what their children are being educated on. And that's another real critical thing that we'll get into, I'm sure, at some point tonight. But it's not just for the sake of getting rid of buildings in Washington, D.C., because the Department of Education had huge buildings and all kinds of big investments in real estate there in D.C. But so it's not strictly to get rid of those. It's really to make education what education should be. And it should be effective. It should be really about educational standards and making sure that our children are actually learning something and not just learning how to be social activists or any of these other types of things that they're trying to basically teach children today. So it is that's really what we're up against. We're up against a disruptive mentality that is going to allow parents to take more responsibility if they want it, and it will allow our children to learn more and better on the things that are important for their for their life. And so this is what this is all about.
Neil?
Well, you asked about when it was started and all that. So started in 1980 by actually 79 really, but it was supposed to be launched in 1980 by Jimmy Carter. And their first initial budget was 14 billion. By 1990 it was 24 billion. 2000 was 40 billion. 2010 it was 63 billion. 2020 it was 72 billion. And now they're asking for 90 billion. So now here's what I think we should understand. What are they doing with the 90 billion? So if you look at what there is, it's all about Title I, individuals with disabilities education, Pell Grants, the student loan administration, not the actual loans, but just the administration of the loans, and then education, innovation, and research. Now you understand there are no teachers on their payroll. Not a single student learns from any of this. There is no, they're not coming up with curriculum. They're just coming up with how they control. Now, understand this. So what does the Department of Education do? During the Biden administration, they're the ones who went in and said, you have to teach about transgenderism. You have to let the boys into the girls' locker rooms. You have to let the boys into the girls' bedrooms when they're out camping on a school excursion or something. You've got to promote the LGBTQ students. If anybody disapproves of it, you've got to kick them out of school. And it went on and on and on and on and on and on. Now, understand that there was nobody who had been elected making these rules. All these rules are by some unknown administration that wasn't elected by any one of us, by anybody for that matter. So they're making laws about how money is going to be dispersed. And of course, the state loses that money. They don't meet any of these, they don't reach these laws. So what it is, it's a big stick that says, look, we're going to dangle so much money, but who's paying for that big stick? We are paying for the big stick, and we don't get to decide what the big stick should be. We don't get to decide any of that. It's completely unconstitutional. It's completely wrong, and it should not even exist. And that's why Linda McMahon, it needs to actually, I was hoping she would destroy it completely. I mean, yeah, you can do some good things with it, but remember, any power you give a president that you like is a power that a president that you hate is also going to have. And so my thing is get rid of it completely, kill it completely. It needs to be dead and gone and made never rest in peace and never come back.
Wow. You know, I think some of the misunderstanding is still that what will happen, because I think it's possible. What, 1980? What's that? 25 years? No, 45 years ago.
Yeah, 45 years. No,
So
40? Yeah, 45 years, yeah.
yeah, about 45 years ago. So, you know, there's probably not a parent who's parenting who remembers what it was like before then. And so, thus, yeah, so now we have a situation where what are we going to do?
Well, but,
It's
but,
not
but
even,
look at the history. In 1980, we actually had good curriculum and good grades, and our kids were actually doing okay. They weren't doing wonderful, but they weren't doing bad. And you look at it, what they're doing now, it's all gone downhill. Now, is this tied to the Department of Education? I'm betting it has a lot of influence on the grades going downhill because you could do something completely stupid and the kids would and you still get the money because the government doesn't care whether you're teaching kids or not. In fact, nothing in their program has to do with any metric of that kids being achieving in math or science. It's achieving in underwater basket weaving. It's achieving in DEI and critical race theory. That's all there, and LGBTQ stuff. But there's nothing about being good in math, reading, or writing, or
right,
science.
but but the point I was getting at for parents is that what does this mean to them? Because if, let's just say, okay, so the budget is like 90 billion.
Billion.
If every state even got 1 billion for education, do you know what that could do for those poor performing
Yeah,
schools,
give it back to the
as far
state.
as schools that don't have gyms, that don't have books, that don't have computer labs, that don't
Although,
have
although
Wi-Fi?
let me say this though, but if you give that 1 billion back to the states, it's just all going to be wasted on more crony corporatism. But I understand your major point, but we've got to get it back in a completely different way and an innovative. If you're going to give it back, it has to go back in an innovative way. But you're right, $1 billion. Think
Well,
about it. That's
yeah, and I
1.6
definitely
billion
don't
dollars.
mean, I don't even mean a blank check, right? And we're not saying to give states a blank check, but the point being is, as a parent,
Yeah.
how does that even access at me? Does that mean that my kids are going to get better school lunch? Are there going to be more after school programs? So when we say, oh, parents, you should be excited. Well, I'm like, okay, well, where do I start? Do I get an ATM card? What happens? And so I think, is that something that, where do they even go to say, okay, I want to see the money? How is that? Do we have yet from
I
the
don't. Yeah,
DOE?
we don't have any details yet.
No. No.
Okay.
So what the process, as I understand it, that we're in right now is this big, beautiful bill, this budget, has to pass and get the president's signature on it. So then all of the coffers for the various secretaries open up, and they could they can administer the monies or the budgets that are allocated for their tranches. So I do think that there's probably some thought, already some thinking about how this process is going to be managed, but we don't yet have the details of that. And I think part of that is because they're waiting for the budget to actually get, passed and with this president's signature. And then I think we'll see a lot of fast and furious activity. The whole idea behind this, though, is to open it up, not just so potentially are the schools that need the most help can get the most help from the feds without having this big, convoluted bureaucracy in DC, but just get the funds passed to them. But also, so parents can then make decisions based on their children. What kind of school is my child most? What kind of learning style does my child need to have in order to excel? And that could be one of these other formats. So what it's really opening up is school choice at a national level. This is big, which I think that we'll see some form of vouchers, or maybe there's some, and I think this is in that big beautiful bill, that there's some tax, or there's some education savings accounts and monies that can flow in and out of that depending on what you decide to do with your child's education. These things will become much more clear when these things are signed over the next 30 to 60 days. But bottom line is parents, come next year. Right now, the children are preparing to, graduate or go to the next grade. They're ending their school year. So by the time school starts again, late August, September, these things will be figured out. Parents will know what, what are the avenues that you can take, and what school platform is most conducive to your child's learning experience. And you can just decide, I think, based on that, with vouchers or education savings plans or some other way that they get that money to the parent and to the school.
Okay. So if we even just now, let's step back a little bit and look at administration. So we've heard a lot in the news about universities getting their money clawed back from them, or even put on hold because they've not been compliant with the regulations that the federal government has put forth. Now, when I hear that, I'm like, well, they're not. If the federal government has put rules in place which are conditional for you getting your money, I don't know why you wouldn't comply, right? Like what? It's kind of like, a parent saying, well, you want your allowance, you need to take out the garbage every week, you need to do the dishes on Tuesday, and you need to keep your grades up. And so the whole idea of just thumbing your nose at that, like, if I don't care, well, fine, you don't get your allowance, but then you can't cry. But there's a ripple down effect, of course, to research programs, to school free lunch programs. So what are administrations supposed to do? I guess could be a frustration for parents, teachers, students. What are they supposed to do in order to, because it's not like you can just cancel all those programs if they don't know, if they're all woven into what you already have existing.
Yeah. So one of the best things I think that schools can and should do is take a proactive, preemptive approach to positioning themselves within their school or school district or within their university. The provost, the dean at the university level, the school board, the county district offices for schools. Those people need to put themselves in a position. This is not an administration that is crying wolf. This is an administration that's already demonstrated that they will claw back some money and or withhold funds until you comply with legal standards. What they're asking is it's not, that you do something that is unethical or untoward. What they're asking is that, look, there are existing laws on how we're to treat people. We don't treat people based upon skin color, like DEI is forcing, or DEI policies have a tendency to encourage.
Mm,
We don't treat people to where they can't have privacy in their showers and in their bathrooms. There should be a biological standard that's been in existence since humankind that we
right,
all can agree to biologically.
right.
This biology has this restroom and shower, and this biology has that one. So what is it? Really, what the conditions for school districts to be able to receive their funding that they've got last year, or even more, because now they can even ask for more grants because this money is being freed up.
Right.
It is just okay. Can we just comply with the existing federal law and the laws that are on the books, that we don't discriminate based on sex, that we don't discriminate based on skin color? Can we just do that? And but the problem is that you've had at least 8 to 10 years of ingrained DEI type policies and ingrained gender type policies that the people in HR departments are incapable of taking an objective look and say, well, we don't comply here, we don't comply here. How can we remedy this so we can all be good? So what I would think that all school districts would advocate for is, can you give us some third party eyes to come in here and help us figure out what to do? Because we don't really know, because we're sort of blinded by our own
Yeah,
um,
that's the thing.
yeah, this is how we've always done it over the past 10 years or so. So, we need help. And so I think what we're doing, and I'm sure you're talking more about this, Miss Boss Lady, but is to look, we're a third party. We don't care. I mean, we'd love for our children to get the maximum funds available to them. We love our parents to be involved in that process and get the maximum best education for their children. But if you have school districts that are stubborn and say, no, we're on triple down on DEI, or universities that has done what Harvard's done and Columbia's done to a large extent, no, that's all right, we don't need the federal money, then that so be it. And you as a parent, you just got to make sure that you move your child to a educational platform that will invest in them properly and give them proper education. So I know I don't know if that answered the question. I think it answered the question.
It did. It did. Neil?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have to realize is that, and we had this discussion, I think, a few months ago, is like, if suddenly Trump came in and told you, you have to do this, 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 and you disagree with every one of them, you would see the left crying, about it all day and saying, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, that's exactly the position we were before this. So I want to say, yeah, if you want to be compliant, we will show you how to be compliant, because we're experts at that. But I do want to say, if you don't want to be compliant, you should realize that the Department of Education shouldn't exist. All right? You should realize the irony of that is that if you're a liberal or a leftist and you think DEI programs should be there, CRT programs should be there, and when Trump says they should be there, you should then realize, well, maybe we don't want a Department of Education. You can do your DEI programs, pay for them yourself. Nobody's going to complain. You have a little parent-teacher association that collects funds and invites people for DEI programs.
Right.
Nobody's going to stop you, right? I have it. You can even rent the schoolrooms because they're allowed for public use. But when you're asking people to pay billions of dollars, you should realize this shouldn't exist. But since it exists, as long as it exists, we want to right the ship and give you a taste of your own medicine and fix things because it's the right thing to do.
Okay. Okay. So we have institutions like universities who have, either decided that we have plenty of, what's that money they call?
Endowments.
Yes, they have plenty of endowments. They're good. But we do have a lot of universities who are not in that case, right? Where they are heavily dependent upon supplements from the federal government. if I'm and here's part of the problem is a lot of this teaching staff, the faculty have been so woven into DEI and those type of policies. How are they even going to begin to step away from that, right? And so we've started the national project called the Clarity Project, which is designed to come alongside and partner educational institutes in a consultative role, but not just at a distance, right? To really be able to step alongside you and say, okay, this curriculum, that policy, you need to remove those, you need to change those, but then you've got to retrain teachers, right? Or retrain faculty. Um, and sometimes I'm like, what is there to retrain? Like, just don't do it anymore. But it's really not that simple to just say, well, stop doing that program, because it's so woven into the very fabric of how they teach. So what would be your suggestions? Like, what are some of the ways that the Clarity Project can actually be valuable? Because a parent could be like, well, just tell the university to stop doing it. It's like it's not that easy. Who wants to take that on?
Well, Lonnie probably wants to chime in at some point, but I would say you've got to untrain you've got these kids who've been trained in this for the last 4 years. And I think there needs to be some deprogramming, if you will. So I would say that's necessary. But you're right. I mean, they should just not be doing it. But again, since we have the opportunity, I think we should go in. And also, it depends on if they've got a place scheduled for this type of class, if they got a program scheduled for this type of class, that program now goes away. Well, that program should be used instead for teaching people the right thing and bringing unity, because that's one of the things that getting rid of CRT and DI will do, is it'll bring unity, which is something that we desperately need in this country, especially after BLM.
And maybe that's the thing that needs to be a replacement, because I don't think there should be a vacuum, right? I don't think we just, cancel. I think you've got to fill that spot with something. And so, Kevin, what would you speak to racial unity? And then we'll go to Lonnie.
Yeah, I think that what we can't dismiss or we can't ignore is the fact that DEI, CRT, social emotional learning, these are Marxist, in other words, they're rooted in some form of Marxist scheme, right? And because they do away with merit or content of character or any of the things that we learned in the civil rights movement with Dr. MLK, and they really focus on strictly how you present, whether what gender you are, gender fluid, whether you're Black or Hispanic, and therefore you get treated differently and better to kind of make up for the times that historically that wasn't the case. And so these people have been trained to do this and to view the world like this. They've been trained to put on a new lens to view the world in a particular way. And so, like you said, a perfect observation. When we go in and we say, look, to really remediate these areas and make sure that everything's copacetic, to where we can provide you with a preemptive compliance certificate for Department of Education standards, these things have to be taken care of. We don't just say, stop doing what you're doing. We provide an education as to why it's important, because that's what's missing. Most people that I talk to about DEI, well, Ken, what do you mean? How is it bad? They really don't know. These people don't know. They think that, hey, it's okay if we do it this way to kind of, level the playing field, make up the difference for how people were treated in the past, blah, blah, blah. And they don't understand that this is literally illegal. that this is, this is racism, that this is, you know, so there does need to be some additional conversation, training, workshops, or whatever to bring people up to speed as to why this is important. That going forward, we need to have a different lens now, a lens of true unity, of true that we honor all humans. All humans come to the table with value, and with dignity and worth, and we should all honor that. I mean, it's just not. But we've lost our way with these particular schemes that have us, focus, so much on color or gender or whatever. And so we do need to do that. But when we do that, we can help people to understand. We can bring them along. We can come alongside and bring them along with us to say, look, this is why it has to be different. These DEI conversations you're having about us as African Americans, it's actually racist. It's actually horribly racist. You're basically maligning us. You're infantilizing us. You're abusing us with these tropes about, well, we have to do it because of black. Excuse me? Yeah. All these generations of blacks that have come through, we never had nothing but D. We haven't even heard of DI until 10 years ago, and you're going to tell us that this is what we need now because this is the only way we can succeed? What about all the history of people that have success that are black prior to DEI? How do you explain that? And so these are the kinds of conversations we need to have to help people to understand that. Look, this is not altruistic. This is really selfish and racist and anti-American. It's un-American.
Yes.
Go ahead, Lonnie.
I just want to jump up and down and go, preach, Kevin, preach. It ignores true history. The agenda, what's being taught. And I always harken back to stories because you guys know I have a million of them. But where I grew up, and specifically speaking of my dad, my father became a successful corporate executive in the late 60s and 70s. How in the world did he do that? And I was talking to a childhood friend who went to the high school I went to, and his father had a similar story, but within law enforcement. His father became one of the first black sheriffs in LA County and filed a successful lawsuit within LA County because of his rights being denied to him because of his ethnicity. And his father won. And so this friend had the nerve to tell me when I told him that my dad was a corporate executive when he was, because he knew who my father was, and traveled all across the country and oftentimes was the only one that looked like him, not only in the States, but internationally. He had the nerve to say that my father was a token. I guess I can say it like this. It severely pissed me off because my friend missed the point. My dad taught me life's not fair, but we all know because we're all Christian here, but God is just. And he's the final arbiter in the affairs of man on this rock called the earth that we live on. So these different agendas that are part of, and it's heavily steeped in Marxism, are anti-God.
Yeah.
And so by default, it's anti-American. And so we've got to retrain those young people that are coming up that have been indoctrinated by these agendas that have come forth, what our true history is. That yes, a man who in my old man is just turned 94 about 2 weeks ago, 94 years of age, how he did that, yet he had no father in his home.
Wow.
Was raised by his mom, and he was the oldest of 5 kids, and became successful because his mom taught him who God was. And my father pursued that because he said, Dad, what's your secret? He said, son, it's really no secret, but I guess faith in God. Mom taught me to focus on your goals. And he said, and ignore the peripheral. And he had a colorful word. I'll just say, give the initials BS. And He said, I said, that's it? Yeah, he said, pretty much. That's how he did it. So I emulated what my father did, and that's how I became successful in the tech industry in the early days. I'm a little bit older than Kevin and Neil, but not by much. And became successful because I saw this man who was my patriarch showed me the way.
Yeah.
And he was always the only one that looked like him. So we've got to, and all we have to do is look in our history books and tell our complete history. And this is why EBLM and all our other platforms are so important, because so many young people are completely clueless. And I would be so bold as to say folks from our generation are completely clueless because they only watch mainstream media.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yep.
Very good
I
point.
go
Very good
on,
summaries
but
there.
it's just, let me just add one more point to it. It really grates me because it says that we aren't good enough. It says that we aren't overcomers. But the word of God is full of Jesus, and all the heavyweights in the Bible talk about overcoming. The whole Bible is about overcoming.
Exactly.
David, perfect example. Shepherd's boy, defended Goliath, became a king. A good portion of the Bible is written by David, and he smelled like sheep most of the time. They said he was always amongst the sheep. And who? David? He's not tall enough. He's not handsome enough. But yet God chose him. And because God chose him, God lifted him up. And so is the plight of us in America as a nation. Because and Neil, you can quote me or Kevin on this. How old is America? Is America 300 years old? No. Did I get that right?
Not even.
Yeah, I think it's
250.
yeah,
250. Will be
yeah,
250.
so 250. And so how did we come out of nowhere, defeated the most powerful nation in the world, Great Britain at the time, and became what we became as a nation? And we're being depicted now as the evil America that did this. And that's what I love about Neil's books and Kevin's book that speak to the true history of us as a nation and why we became as powerful as we did. All right, I'm done. I'm ready to preach.
I'm glad you brought
I'm
up
sorry,
Neil's
boss man.
book. No, 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 that's good. That's good. Um, I'm glad you brought up Neil's book about how to end racism. So, Neil, I think there's going to be a very particular track that needs to be followed when we're talking to these educational institutions. And,
Yes.
you know, I'm thinking as much as we talk to administration and teachers, community people, the faith community, business owners, they're going to have to be the ones to put the pressure,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, on the schools to make sure that they comply,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know. And so, Neil, talk to us a little bit. I know we've had a whole session before on your book, How to End Racism, but give us a pitch again. Talk to us again about the book and how it's so integral right now.
Well, I mean, one of the key things I mentioned in there obviously is the educational system. I mean, when blacks were teaching themselves on the height of racism back in the 1930s, the literacy rate amongst blacks was 70%, right? And then you fast forward to today, it's 17%.
Yep.
Well, I mean, we can tie that directly back to the fatherlessness. The rate of fatherlessness started. I mean, it's all started to go downhill in the '60s, late '60s, when Lyndon Johnson's brought in the welfare roll and all that stuff. So the difficulty is you've got a population of fatherless kids, and so they're bringing in the crime and the violence and the inability to have a peaceful home, family home where they can study into that population, I mean, into the schools. But one thing we have noticed is that when schools actually start teaching and are actually stricter than they are, and they have regulations, uniforms, charter schools. Blacks do amazing well charter schools, and 80% of all black parents want vouchers so they can take their kids and send them to a Christian school or to a private school with us. So whenever you see all that, you see that it's not that the black parents don't know about it. They just are unable to do anything about it. So that's where the church and the community come in and say, one, we need vouchers. Two, we need, if there's educational dollars are going to come in, it needs to go to something besides the public school, because the public school is just going to waste it in some other way. So There are lots of ways we can go there, and there are solutions. The problem is that the left doesn't want solutions, which because it means more money. Think about this: if you just like Linda McMahon, her job is to put herself out of a job. Just like here at EBLM, our job is to not need an EBLM anymore, right? That's our goal. The day when we say, hey, there's nothing more for us to do, we're done, we're all happy that we've completed our goal, we completed our task. We can stand before the Lord and say, yeah, we did what you asked us to do. But until that point, we've got to be innovative and figure out how to get around. Why? Because there's this what's the word I'm looking for? This use of money, of funds, this canal of funds, this coming in, and it grows if you fail, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't grow if you're successful. It grows if you fail, and so there's no incentive at all for them to succeed, and we've got to do something about it.
But there have been so many books on the school to prison pipeline, on failing education. But I want you to hit on something which you've not done. In your book, when you talk about how to end racism, you have some really key points there. This is your sell your book time, Neil.
Well, I say
Sell your book.
there's 7 or some key points there. One, you've got to let the blacks fend for themselves. Number one.
Yep.
You've got to stop helping. You've got to start treating them like infants, as Kevin says. You got to start treating them like adults, so they
Stop
suffer
trying to help us.
their bad decisions and they learn not to do it. That's number one. And that's Frederick Douglass. He said, just leave us alone.
Yes.
Just leave us alone, right? So if you see a black man walking the road, leave him alone. You see a black man who needs something, leave him alone, right? His fellow people will come to his aid. So that's number one. The second thing is we've got to reduce the fatherlessness rate. If we can reduce the fatherlessness, then we will be able to stop that. And the way to reduce fatherlessness is you've got to reverse the damage that welfare laws have done. Because what they've done is they've replaced the father in the home. You don't need a father if your mother's getting money, and only gets more money if there is no father in the home. So that was a vicious, evil thing that was created. And I think LBJ knew exactly what he was doing. He was a racist. He knew exactly what he was doing, right? Because before he introduces this thing, he talks about how black kids need more parental involvement, need solid families. And then he instantiates this whole thing that destroys families. And there was the man in the home law. There was a man in the home, you got less money. So you start running into that. And so I start going down that. It was, I'm sure there was a point you wanted me to hit on in particular.
No, what I'm saying is, in your book, I almost feel like there should be community classes or study groups, or churches should take that book and do book clubs around them, because it's not just education, right? It's not just in the classroom. It's not like it's just the teacher's fault.
Yeah.
It's not just the school administration's fault. This is a community issue. This is a faith-based issue. And we're going to need both. And I feel like sometimes when we hear about taking down education, we forget looking at the community. We forget the faith-based involvement. We forget that business owners have probably more at stake than most people think about, right? Because one, they need good employees, and two, they need prosperous customers who can come and buy their services.
So one of the things we got to abolish the minimum wage, right? One of the problems with the minimum wage is that it was designed by the KKK, right? It was designed by racists back in the 1930s, and the reason why they designed it is because black men were going into white business owners and saying, "Look, I will work for half the rate that a white man will work for," and so naturally they were getting hired over the white man because the color that covers all other colors is green. Right, so they were like, "Hey, I can make twice as much on this job if I use black people." So the black laborers were learning those skills. They were taking back the money and the skills. They were starting their own company. They were getting really good at what they were doing, and they were competing with the whites in one sense. But the other thing is they were competing with the whites just at the labor level. So what the KKK decided is that they wanted to eliminate this practice, and they tried different ways. They tried going around and threatening, business owners, saying stop hiring black people and all that. And that would work for a while, but you can't be everywhere. So eventually people would go back to hiring blacks. So they decided, well, the best, who can be everywhere all the time? Well, the government can. So let's start a minimum wage law. And it was couched in terms like, oh, we got to make sure everybody gets paid the right amount of money, and we don't want people not to be paid too much, too little, and that's what it's couched at. But what it does is it eliminates that segment of the population that's not ready. So if you go, that's not unable to compete equally. So if you go back to the black schools with the 17% literacy rate, who is going to hire a black kid who can't add, who can't read for $17 an hour or $25 an hour, whatever it is in California today, right? Who's going to do that? Nobody. So as Thomas Sowell says, the effective minimum wage for black kids is zero.
Yep.
Because you're never going to get hired. On the contrary, if you actually gave them the chance, say, look, you're not worth $25, but you're worth $5 an hour to me. Would you be willing to work $5? And the guy says, yeah, sure, I'll work for $5. So he works for $5 and he learns to do other things. And then suddenly the employer says, hey, actually you're worth $10 an hour, because if I don't give you the $10, you're going to go to someone else and work for him for $10 an hour. And I want to keep you here. So they're incentivized to keep him there. And then that goes to 15, goes to 20. And finally the guy's making more than minimum wage because he's learned that skill and he can take that skill anywhere else. And a good example I gave when we were here is that I did that when I was starting our startup companies. I've done 4 startup companies, now doing the 5th. When I started the startup companies, we didn't have money to pay anybody. Everybody was working there for free. And so I went to the high school group. I was a youth, I used to work with a youth counselor, and I would work with the high school kids at my church. And I said, hey, we got some work for some IT guys. All you have to do is connect things, move PCs around, do some IT stuff here and there, and we can pay you with pizza at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So I had a bunch of kids say, yeah, sure, I'll work for pizza. I mean, so they would come in and they would do whatever stuff we wanted, running cables, whatever. And then after a while, they learned all how to handle and install all the computers. And then after a while, they were like, you know what? I just got a job offer next door paying me $15 an hour. This is back in the 90s. Paying $15 an hour. We're like, no, we'll pay you 18. We'll pay you 18, right? Suddenly they were worth much more. And then a few years ago, I saw this guy. He'd become the CTO, Chief Technology Officer of a big major Christian university. And I said, hey, congratulations on your promotion. He goes, yeah, I just want you to remember that you forced me to work for you for pizza when I was 18, when I was 17. Now he's the CTO. And he says, by the way, I just want to thank you. I would never have been in this position if you hadn't just said, hey, come work for me and learn.
That's capitalism.
It is, right?
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. When I worked in the tech sector for systems integration, mainframes and mid-range systems, how we became our own company is doing that very thing. We saw what IBM was doing and we did it for cheaper. That's as simple as that.
The free market.
Yeah.
So you got to involve all that in. And what the left has been doing, sadly, is they've been eliminating blacks from all these positions, and they're, in a sense, purposely dumbing them down. And when you take away, remember the age of ebonics, and when you take away mathematics and you say math is white adjacent, or it's racist, mathematics is racist, logic is racist. Well, that's the only reason why people hire anybody, is because they're able to do mathematics or logic. People don't hire you for underwater basket weaving, right? Unless you're with the government.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I, as we're having this conversation, I hope that people are taking a second thought about what it is that needs to happen around changing our communities. Right? Education is key, but as we've had this discussion, I hope you understand that business owners are key, faith community is key, parent involvement is key, right? It's not the government's job to raise our children. It is a community. It takes a whole
that's
village. And
Churches must lead this cultural renewal.
how do they do that?
One is we were in Chicago. What was that pastor's name, Kevin? We were in Chicago, and he had
Corey Brooks.
Troy Brooks, right? Wonderful man of God, just doing amazing work. And he had, that day that we went to visit him, we were down in the thing, and they were doing interviews. And we had these black kids coming in, 3-piece suits. They were trained. They'd been trained to interview with these corporate companies, and these companies were looking. They weren't looking for like highfalutin positions. They were positions, but they were responsible positions, and these kids were all interviewing for these positions, and they were learning. And these kids would then move to more jobs, and they'd move up. And then he had trained them. They had to wear ties. They had to wear suits. They were doing something for the community that would make changes that would last lifetimes, right? And why aren't churches doing this? Why are they instead saying, no, we want more government money? No, how do you stand on your own 2 feet? That's what they should be doing. And of course, the gospel, but we assume that they do that.
Yeah, that. Sometimes we shouldn't assume, but because then we could get into. I think we've had lots of broadcasts about just some of the failures of faith communities as far as even falling into and buying into the whole social, emotional, and CRT and DEI training. So with the Clarity Project and with Neil and Kevin's experience in training and writing books, what do you think are, let's say that there's a teacher who's watching right now and realizes that, yeah, my school is just, the principals are just like, we don't care, we're going to hide it, the country is too big. They're not going to see us. Where do they begin? What do they do?
Well, I think that you going to our website and taking a look at the website, what we offer as far as the Clarity Project is concerned, and then taking that first step to fill out the form is a good first step. Now, here's the issue. We cannot assume that we won't suffer consequences for bad policy. Because even if you have the principal or school board, president of school board sign an affidavit saying, yeah, we want this grant money and we're good and we're not going to do these things. And if one student or one parent complains that this stuff is being going on, you better believe McMahon is going to send one of her lieutenants to go out and check this thing out. And if you lied in an affidavit on a federal form saying the school complies with no DEI, no gender, bathroom, mixing the genders in bathrooms, stuff like that. And if you lie about that, then not only will the money be called back, but somebody's could have further ramifications because you lied on a federal form for your own gain and that kind of stuff. So whoever belongs in these school districts, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a parent who's concerned, they want to make sure that the school is in a position to continue to get the grants that they've been getting, and even more, because now these money is going to be freed up. So there's an opportunity for the district to get even more money. They should say, look, we need to reach out to this third party. These people have been doing this work. Neil and I have gone and we've talked to, probably thousands of parents, administrators, teachers, various parts of the United States about DEI, about CRT, and we've written books. One of my books is DEI in 3D, and Neil's book on racism. We've both written books on CRT. So the bottom line is we're an organization that is fully equipped to do this. Go in and do whatever level of remediation and education that it would take in order to make sure that that school or that school district is in compliance so they can get the funds. So it's not good enough to rest and say, well, let's just not do anything until we have to. because somebody's going to have to square on that grant form that we're not doing, this stuff, right? And somebody's got to be willing to put their name on that. And that person also has to be willing to suffer the consequences if indeed you know better, but things are going on and that. So we want to stop all of that. We want to give a preemptive compliance certificate that, hey, as of this date, we've certified to meet the Department of Education standards. We've had this third party organization who's taken us through remediation in these following areas. We made the following, we've taken the following steps, and we're good. And that gives the school district or that university or that school the power to know, look, we're taking this seriously. We know this is federal funds. It's for the children. It's for our students. It's for them that want to make sure we're in the best position to continue to receive the funds. And so now, if you don't care about your students, you know,
Right.
fine, just
Right.
roll the dice and see what happens. I mean, you don't care. But for most, I think most school administrators and the school districts, they do care. They want to make sure they can maximize whatever funds they get. And it would be terribly embarrassing for somebody in that school district to receive the grant on paper and a month later have everything clawed back and the grant request denied because the feds found out that you're really not in compliance. You lied on the forms. So it's the best way to do it is to have a third party that'd be willing to come in and help you to get things straight. To just get it straight. It's fine.
Okay. Any closing comments, guys?
Here's the thing that I want everybody who would ultimately see this to remember. Look, Neil and I have written multiple books on this stuff that these schools are wrestling with right now. We've done the trainings, we've done the workshops, we've done countless podcasts and all kinds of forums on this stuff. And I would venture to guess that because of our writing, because of our education, because of our training, because of the workshops we've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years, that we're not aware of any other organization that's positioned to do the kind of remediation and certification compliance that we are. I can't think of a single one. There's great organizations out there. They haven't done the work that we've done. They haven't written the books that we've written. They haven't stood up to DEI and CRT over the past 4 or 5 years like we have. So, we're in a prime position to help. We have the expertise to do that. And I, as a doctor, a PhD on leadership and management, will use all of our skill sets, all of our education, everything to make sure that the educational institution, whether it be a university or whether it be a K through 12 organization, is in a position to win. So that's our only thing. And this is not, by the way, when we come in, it is not a political conversation. We don't have to talk about the merits of DEI and whether you really feel in your heart of heart that it's a great. This is not about that. This is about, can we get you compliant so you can get the grant, so you can take care of your children, whether it be a student or a child. We don't have to have these dialogues about the rightness or wrongness of it. We can focus on getting it done first, and then we can, sort of educate on how do we unify going forward around these concepts that are, sort of causing some consternation. So, and I think we're the best organization in the United States to be able to do that.
I agree. I may be a little biased, but I definitely agree. There's just not Kevin, you hit the nail on the head. There's no other organizations that are on the tip of the spear like we are. They're just not out there. This organization's doing great work, not befalling them, but we bring something unique to the table, and we have the audacity to boldly be able to state that.
Yep.
Very good. Neil,
Not much to
anything?
add. I agree.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our conversation about education and changes that are coming up and need to be done. And please visit our website, everyblm.com/the Clarity Project. And that's th-clarity-project. And you'll find out the information. You'll see our profiles for our team members. And we look forward to hearing from you. All right. Have a good night.
Goodbye.
Bye.